Hey, this is Joe from Gama, and you're watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 348 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with Joe McGuigan from Gamma Bomb and also Devil Sum. So, how are you doing today, Joe?
I'm getting on pretty good. How are you getting on, Richard?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's a good afternoon here in Georgia in the USA. How is it? I believe you're in Ireland.
Yeah, I'm just at the border here between the north of Ireland and the south, and there's like a big storm happening at the moment. So
Oh
there's
shit.
lots of trees have come down and stuff like that.
Awesome. So, first Irish band on my show, and congrats for being the first.
It's an honor. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
So 350 shows already. That's cool.
yeah, because I don't think there's much really metal bands from Ireland. The only other bands I could think of are Primordial and, of course, Thin Lizzy. I mean, I'm sure there's some bands that are from Ireland that I don't even know about.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of kind of Celtic metal bands like Cruachan and Male Mordia and stuff. So there's a lot of kind of trad metal, kind of that kind of thing, where it's mixing folk music and heavy metal together.
I gotta check that out. But it's so great to be able to have you on. So, kind of the what I want to do is talk about like your musical history and sort of do a rundown of your discography. But take me back to young Joe McGuigan. So, growing up in Ireland, what were like the first bands that got you into metal, and what made you want to play guitar and slap at a bass?
So whenever we were young guys, it was kind of like the mid '90s. So there was a lot of stuff around then, like Metallica, around the Load era, or a band that was like really important for me and our singer Philly was Ugly Kid Joe. So they were kind of, I don't know how you would kind of classify Ugly Kid Joe. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
metal music, but I guess it was kind of tongue in cheek or fun as well. So that's where we kind of got the idea that it didn't have to be super serious. We could just have fun with it. So I grew up with a lot of that kind of stuff and Iron Maiden, things like that
Yeah.
as well.
Fucking legends.
A really important thing that happened to us when we were kids was our local library was getting rid of all their cassettes and they were moving on to CD. So they sold all their cassettes for super cheap. And that's how we got into bands like Halloween and Nuclear Assault and stuff like that.
Nice. And so tell me about because about forming Gamma Bomb because the band formed in 2002. So how'd you get to know like Philly and everybody?
I met Philly on my first day of high school when I was like 11 years old. And we've been best buddies ever since then. So like me and Philly had been, I guess as kids, we would sort of hang around and drink beer and write kind of stupid lyrics for songs and stuff. And it was only actually kind of a few years later, whenever we were like 16 or 17, we started playing bass and guitar. Philly originally was the bass player and I was the singer. And then we we swapped around.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And then I know that same year you did I believe the first like demo release, the survival option. Like it's very raw sounding. Like where was that recorded at?
That was recorded at a little local studio right outside of the town that we're from, which is called Newry. And back then there was no heavy metal studios in Ireland. Like it was a real struggle to even find anybody to work with who kind of knew any of the bands that we were talking about. When we would say, "Oh, we want it to sound like Exodus," they would be like, "Never, never heard of those guys." So maybe the first two demos and even our first record, we made all those in Ireland, and there just wasn't producers around who kind of knew what to do with it. So part of it was us being green, and the other part was just, I guess, thrash hadn't really had a revival yet, so there weren't too many people who were experienced recording it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course you did the second demo, the Fatal Mission. I think that was a great one. Did you sort of want to slowly start to like refine like the Gamma Bomb sound?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big difference then was we got our guitar player, Kevin Canavan, and he was a really good guitar player, and that kind of helped us all kind of move up a little bit, up a level. So it was cool around that time, 2004, when we did our second demo. That's when we first started playing shows abroad. So we went to Scotland and played some shows over there, and went over to England and played some shows over there. So that was cool.
Nice. Nice. And then, of course, flash forward to 2005, you did the first full-length album, Survival of the Fastest. And I thought that it's in my opinion, one of the most underrated like thrash metal debut albums or modern thrash albums, I should say, in my opinion. So what was sort of like the whole writing and recording process like for the debut full-length Gamma Bomb album?
So, like a lot of bands, I guess, your first album is like all the songs you'd pretty much written up to then. So we were kind of super happy with the material. It took quite a long time to record the record because we were kind of kids and we were doing it, on weekends and, getting our mums to drop us off at the studio and that kind of thing. So yeah, like the recording took a long time, and it was right around that period in 2005 that Nuclear Assault had got back together, and they brought out an album on this label called Screaming Ferret Records. And what happened was those guys wanted to make a record with us. So we recorded the album to bring out on that label, and that label kind of folded. They had some money problems, partially because that Nuclear Assault album they brought out, Third World Genocide, was really bad. So it didn't really help them out too much.
Yeah.
So what happened was there was another label in Europe called Witch's Brew, a little small label, and they agreed to release it. And they'd done like the first Toxic Holocaust, and they subsequently did the first Hell Ripper and stuff like that. So they're like a little cool label like that. And it's actually this month is the 20th anniversary of that record coming out. So
Hell
we're
yeah.
talking to Witch's Brew at the moment about bringing out like a reissue of it with some demo tracks, some live tracks and stuff. And we're even talking about maybe going in and re-recording it all live with the original lineup again, because it's one of the issues we've always had with that record is just the production kind of really it turns a lot of people off. It's not very, I don't know. Whenever we first went on tour in Europe in 2007, I remember a couple of people coming up to us and saying, "Oh, Gamma Bomb are a band from the '80s," because the album sounded so crap. It sounded like
Yeah.
it had been recorded in 1990 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I was like listening to every album in chronological order. When I heard that, I thought you all had been around for a long ass time, but looked up, I was like since 2002. I was like, wow, I thought you guys had been around longer.
Yeah, so look, I guess at the time we were super happy with that. Like we were like, cool, we achieved our goal. It sounds like an old '80s record, but we wanted to start being able to play shows in Europe, and we knew we had to get onto a bigger label to do that. So we started literally going and getting the bus around England and stuff like that, just carrying our guitars and sleeping on people's floors, playing shows. And around that time, Earache Records had signed Evil and Bonded by Blood and a couple other bands. So we kind of kept pestering them until they finally said, "Okay, we'll sign you guys," and that's how we kind of went on to make Citizen Brain.
Yeah, led me right into there because usually with the debut album you have like your entire life to write and there's a lot of hype with the first album. When it came to making Citizen Brain, did you felt like any pressure at all to follow up Survival of the Fastest?
No, not at all. I think that we thought there were no expectations really. We knew that we could write better songs, and a big difference around then was we got a drummer and a guitar player from Dublin. And as I said, around then because Eric were signing bands and there was a bit of a thrash revival happening, we kind of found ourselves in a good place where we had lots of songs, we had label interest, and we were doing a lot of shows. It's actually kind of interesting. I think for the first 4 or 5 years of the band, we never played with any other thrash bands. All the bands we played with were punk bands. So like we played with GBH and Poison Idea and all these kind of punk bands. And it was around 2006 or seven we started being able to play shows with Exodus and stuff like that.
Hell
So
yeah.
uh, the cool thing with that was, we were such good buddies and we were all really on the same page about we love like really crap 80s horror movies and we were big time into nostalgia and stuff. So writing the songs for Citizen Brain and Tales from the Grave in Space. It was all just one long period of continuously writing and recording.
Yeah. And you sort of mentioned like it was around the time around Citizen Brain you started touring outside of like the Ireland and the UK for the first time. So what was that like playing in front of like new countries and being like, wow, this is different from Ireland?
Yeah, it was a really big eye opener for us. And it's funny, even back then, like we were still hanging around with a map, with the driver trying to find venues and all that kind of stuff. It was all very analog. It was really cool. We toured with Exodus on Citizen Brain, and we toured with Overkill on Citizen Brain,
Yeah.
and with Warbringer, and Bonded by Blood, and a bunch of other bands. So I think by the time we kind of went round a year later to make the next record, Tales, we'd done like 150 shows, and the band was kind of sounding a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course Tales from the Grave in Space. Quick turnaround from Citizen Brain. Did you start writing for Tales right after Citizen Brain first came out?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I remember actually the tour bus coming to pick me up outside my house and bringing a guitar with me. And everyone was like, "Why are you bringing a guitar?" And I was like, "Well, I want to, work on songs while we're out here playing shows," which we did. We kept on working on the songs, and like Eric were kind of super behind us at that stage. So it was really kind of down to them. They got us a good budget. Put us up somewhere in a little cottage for a month. So we just sat around drinking beer and recording during the day and watching Lucio Fulci movies and stuff at night. It was fun, like.
Hell yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I feel like Tales from the Grave in Space. I feel like that's where Gamma Bomb was Gamma Bomb, and it's honestly, in my opinion, my favorite album from you guys.
I would probably agree with you. And like, it's something that's kind of weird because, we're starting to work on our ninth album right now. But whenever you think of most of the bands that you kind of love, your favorite album tends to be like the second or third album, something like that,
Yeah,
you know?
it's tend to be like that with a lot of bands.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like, yeah, I understand what you mean. Like, it feels like Tales from the Grave. It really had a lot of what people like about us. It was super fast and like lots of songs about 80s movies and things like that. And Eric Records were super behind the idea of giving the album away for free. So it meant that people could go and download it for free, and it came as a free copy with Metal Hammer and stuff. So the kind of way that we look back on it now is that, the first record kind of took us out of Ireland, and then Citizen Brain kind of got us into Europe. And then when we did Tales from the Grave in Space, we toured all over the world, for 3 years.
Yeah, did you tour the
Um,
States at all?
yeah, we did. We did 3.5 months in the States.
Oh wow.
So it was Bonded by Blood, Gama Bomb, Evil, Overkill, and Forbidden.
Holy
So that
shit,
was
what a lineup, man.
like 2 months, and then there was like some shows Eval were headlining for a couple of weeks in Canada, and then we did a few weeks with DRI as well. So like we did a whole bunch of touring back then in the States. And it's a shame for us because like we really love to come back and go and
Yeah,
do a big tour. And we do get offers quite frequently to do stuff,
yes.
but it's more difficult the older you get really to kind of go away for that amount of time for 2 months or something to go on tour.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see you guys eventually. I mean, I am going to see you guys in January at the 70,000 Tons of Metal Cruise, so that'll be my first time ever seeing you guys.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, no, we're really looking forward, and we've done it a few times before, and it kind of feels like it is a good way for us to connect with our US fans. And like, I don't know if people kind of know this, but like for a lot of kind of bands like us from Europe coming over to the States to do a tour can sometimes cost 25 or $30,000, just in
Yeah.
terms of renting vans, visas, flights, renting gear, all that kind of stuff. So
Shit ain't cheap, man.
yeah, totally. And we will come back and do it, but we just want to do it whenever, the circumstances kind of
Yes,
suit
the
us.
stars
But
aligned.
yeah, totally. But it was a cool period, as I said. One of the things with having the record as a free download meant that we could go and play shows in places like South America, where really strangely we did a tour with Dark Funeral down there,
Oh
which is
yeah.
such a weird package.
My homies, right? They're my buddies. I know Mo's like one of my good friends.
Yeah, they're actually, seen as like a bunch of these kind of like black metal bands. Actually, when you get to know them, they're super
Yeah.
nice guys
Yeah,
and
they're
really
really
funny.
chill.
And
Chill. Like
yeah, totally.
I've interviewed all five members. Uh,
So yeah,
yeah.
they're cool, and yeah, we got to go and play at places where the record wasn't physically available. So that really opened things up. It's kind of hard for young people to understand now because now everything is online for free. But at that time, it was a really big thing in the industry that a major-ish label wanted to release a record completely for free.
Yeah. Yeah, then moving on to the next album, the Terror Tapes. I like it. I know there was a 4 year gap since Terror Tapes came out in 2013. So, did you really wanted to take your time and sort of like hone your craft with that album?
Well, what happened actually was that the album Tales from the Grave came out December 2009 online, and then in January it came out on CD and vinyl. And then we spent about 2 years touring non-stop, like 300 shows or whatever. And that took
Oh
us up
shit.
until around
Yeah.
2012. So yeah. So what happened in 2012 was our original guitar player, Luke, he met a girl when we were on tour in America, and he said, "Okay, that's it. I'm done, guys. I'm heading off." So he left the band, and that was kind of very difficult for us at the time because me and him and Philly had started the band, and we were the like core songwriters. So it was difficult when he left, and then right around the same time that he left we were having legal problems with our label Eric at the time, and we had to go and go the legal route to kind of get out of our contract with Eric, and then spend 6 months finding another label and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that was probably the main reason for the gap. Like as far as like a different direction, I think maybe we thought that like Citizen Brain and Tales were too similar, that they sounded very like the same kind of record. So we were also big fans of, as I said, Iron Maiden or Saxon and stuff. And we said, is there some way to kind of incorporate a little bit of that sound into it as well?
Yeah. Yeah, and of course you got that was signed to AFM Records for that album. So how did they find Gamma Bomb?
Well, it was partly our legal issues that we were having with Eric. They wanted us to make another record and we didn't want to. And whenever we got kind of legal with it, AFM came in and said, listen, we can help straighten this out and we can sign you guys up for a deal. And we had a manager at the time who was like super into that and he helped arrange a lot of that. And we had a really good relationship with AFM. I think we did three records with them. Yeah, and it was like cool guys, German label, very different kind of mentality. Um, but yeah, like I guess around that time, like after that record, we did a tour with Artillery, and then we did a tour with who else? Another Warbringer tour, stuff like that. But people in the band started having kids or jobs that were kind of important. So
Yeah.
we kind of we had a discussion with Tankard, the German band.
Yeah, I love Tankard.
Yeah, so we were speaking to those guys, and they said, what you can do is you can try and do this as a full-time job, and it's probably gonna not make you guys a lot of money, or you can do what we do, which is just go and play weekends and do select tours, and you can keep your job, and everyone will be like, it'll help the band stay together. So we decided to do that. And I remember at the time talking to our buddies in Evil and Bonded by Blood about it, and they said, no, you should keep touring a bunch. And then, like literally within 6 months, both those bands had stopped touring because
Yeah.
they'd kind of put an unrealistic expectation of how many shows you could do, or if you could support your family through doing this kind of thing. So yeah, as I said, it was a decision that was easy for us to make because, like, number one, the most important thing in our band has always been that we were buddies. So, as much effort as we want to put into songwriting or making records or playing shows, we wanted to put the same amount of time into hanging out together and drinking beer and watching movies and making sure our friendship was like good. Because we
Yeah.
were like, as long as we're good buddies, the songwriting will be easy. Whereas if we don't get on with each other, then it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. And then next up is Untouchable Glory, and I know this year does mark the 10-year anniversary of that, but I don't think that, in my opinion, is a very underrated album in you guys' discography. I feel like it's where you kind of found your style with the rapid guitar lines, with the lines, and then just like the drumming and then the vocals, like everything. I feel like it's just where it all just came together.
I really like that record. It is kind of divisive. There's some people who really like it, and some people who don't really like it too much. Um, it's yeah, it is a funny one. Like I think that around that period, I was still doing a lot of the writing in terms of like maybe about 70% of the music, and then Philly would write a lot of the lyrics and stuff. But around then, we wanted to try and open it up and try and get our two guitar players to write more music, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and totally.
it's an interesting record, I guess. Like in the Gambon discography, it's probably the album that we played the least amount of shows on because we kind of just wrote it, recorded it, and then we started recording the next album actually pretty quickly before after that, you know.
Yeah, yeah, speed between the lines. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I think because, as I said, some of the guys in the band had like little kids and stuff. This is like the start of 2016. We just said, let's just start writing another record, and we come up with a bunch of songs we really, really liked. The one thing that kind of is a bit of a thorn in the band's side about that record is that um, the artwork isn't really very Gamma Bomby. We what we did was we spent like a couple of $1,000 on getting a guy to do a painting for the cover, and we didn't like it. And we're like, right, okay, we're just gonna have to eat that cost, and we'll hire somebody else to do some more artwork. And we didn't like that artwork either. So
Yeah.
we were like 3 grand in the hole, and we didn't have anything to put on the cover of the record. So my brother does all the design for the booklets on the records and stuff, so he did that one.
Nice. Nice. And then kind of going into 2019, you were part of Agent Steel for a little bit. Like not a lot of people know that. So how'd you get to hook up with those guys?
Well, the situation was that a buddy of mine ran a festival in Europe, and he said that they had Agent Steel booked to go and play some shows at it. And I was like, really? So what's the story? And he said, no, it's just John Cyrus on his own, and he's trying to find some guys to put together a band. And like I'd been a huge fan of Agent Steel since I was a young guy and stuff, so I was kind of interested in doing it, but I knew that they had like a pretty high attrition rate in members. So there'd probably, I think I was like bass player number 26 or something like
Yeah.
that, you know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make
So
any bass player jokes.
I originally approached them and just said, I'm in a band already, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to tour, but I can certainly help you guys do some demos to try and get you a record deal. So I did that, and we wrote some songs for about 3 or 4 months. And Cyrus came over and stayed in my house for a couple of weeks and stuff. So actually, our other guitar player, Domo, he played guitar on that demo, and yeah, it got them a record deal. And I kind of knew that it wasn't going to work on the road just because I think that his personality was probably still a bit you know, like it was in the 80s, or the same issue that he was having with lots of band members. So um whenever they started getting ready for a European tour, I just said, listen, guys, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is there was too much like kind of cancellations and fighting and then canceling shows for no reason and stuff. So I just said, okay, that's fine, I'm out of there. And then actually about a year after that, they contacted me again and said, could you help write some songs for the next record that they were doing? So I wrote a bunch of songs for that as well.
Nice. And then going into 2020, I know during that time there was the whole pandemic, which really kind of fucked up the whole music industry and stuff. But during that time, you just started working on the next Gamma Bomb album, which would be Sea Savage.
Yeah, so like at the end of 2019, we played some shows in Japan, and our drummer Paul, who'd been with us for like 16 years, decided that those were going to be his last shows. So we kind of came into the lockdown. We didn't have a drummer, but we kind of thought, you know what, we could make this record ourselves. So we wrote a bunch of songs, and we hired James, who he's a guy that we know, James Stewart. He'd been in some
Yeah.
bands, and
Yeah,
he's in Decapitated at the moment and
played with Vader, and
dating.
he's also playing live with Belphegor. Like, I love him. I love his drumming. In my opinion, one of the most underrated metal drummers, period. Love to have him on my show eventually.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if you hit him up, he'll definitely come on. He's a cool, very, very good drummer. So he lives in Poland, and we sent him all the demos, and he recorded the drums in Poland, and then we recorded all the guitars in lockdown and stuff in our house and stuff, and got it out. And it actually ended up being really beneficial for us because I think there were so many bands who had made albums and they said, we're not going to release this until the pandemic is over, because they want to go on tour and stuff. And we thought, there's a captive audience sitting at home, so let's just release it and see what happens. And it
Yeah.
did really well. I think our streaming numbers on Spotify went from like 20,000 up to like 350,000 or something like that for a couple of years, which was really good because it kind of felt like we were getting the same exposure from going and doing a bunch of shows without having to leave the house.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I know during that whole time, a lot of bands, like even some bands that had albums written from like 2018 or 19, I feel like some, even with like some of the lyrics, I feel like they definitely hit differently now as the world changes. So I feel like every art is just can be very interpretive over the years or develop different contexts and meaning.
Totally. I would 100% agree. And I think that's part of the reason why the idea of giving awards for any type of art is stupid because like it's so subjective. Something can mean something to you at one stage in your life and then not at another stage. So it's yeah, it's definitely it was a strange period, but I'm really glad that we kind of did that because it showed us that we didn't need to go into a studio. We could just go and make an album ourselves and then give it to a label to release. So, and it was actually kind of similar situation with Bats. We wrote a bunch of songs and
Yeah.
hired James again to come in and do the drums. And did it exactly the same way we'd done Sea Savage.
Yeah. And then kind of going into 2021, you did started up a double some. So how did band come to be and how did you choose decide to start a new band?
Well, what it was that I'd always played guitar, writing songs for Gama Bomb, and I just thought I'd like to do something where I could play guitar. A buddy of mine who I went to the gym with runs a gym in town, and yeah, he was kind of interested in like playing bass and doing a bit of singing. So I said, okay, let's do something. We're trying to decide what kind of direction to go in, and because we were both kids in the mid 90s, we were like, yeah, it should sound like, the Megadeth album Euthanasia mixed with Paradise Lost, or it should kind of have some sort of that kind of mid 90s metal feel, but like also be spooky and have a bit of like a gothic vibe. So that's what I have to do tomorrow. And we're just finishing off the guitar solos for the new Devilsome album, which will be out at the end of the year.
Ooh, ooh, the exclusive here, folks. Yeah. But yeah, but between like playing guitar and playing bass with playing those two different instruments, do you find like you're able to express like different sides of you creatively?
Yeah, 100%. I love playing bass live, and I don't really like playing guitar live. I find that like whenever I'm playing bass, I feel very comfortable. But I love recording guitar in the studio, and I love writing music on the guitar and stuff. So they definitely kind of feel like two different sides of me. But like it's a cool sort of thing to do because I knew that I didn't want to go and play guitar in a thrash band because I guess with Gama Bomb, our two guitar players were so good that I would always be nitpicking and stuff. So I said, okay, if we do something that's a bit more kind of 90s retro instead of 80s retro, maybe it'll feel more comfortable.
Yeah. And then of course talking about the latest Gavin Bomb album, Bats, which came out in 2023, a really great album. So what was like the whole writing and reporting process like for Bats?
Yeah, very similar to Sea Savage. We had gone and done a bunch of touring for Sea Savage, and we had a drummer, Chris Williams, who's now an official member of the band,
Yeah. How'd he
playing
join?
shows. And when did he? I think it was 2020. Around then was whenever he joined, and he'd been playing drums for a couple of years. He was another band from the UK called Shrapnel, and they were making a record the same time that we were going to make Bats. So we asked James to do the drums for it again. And it was cool. I think that like James's performance maybe on Bats is a little kind of bit of a step back from Sea Savage. Because I think that in Sea Savage it was probably more his style of material, whereas Bats is a little more kind of retro sounding. So maybe he went for more of an 80s vibe. But yeah, like I think that musically we kind of got to a point where everybody in the band was able to contribute like an equal amount of stuff. So as I said, back in the day, it would be a thing where there were some records where I was writing 75% of the riffs, whereas now John and Damo and me and even Philly will all come up with all the music kind of together and then work on the lyrics. So and it feels so much better doing that because you're kind of you'll get better material from each other. If someone else has written a good song, it'll help you write a better song, you know. Whereas if you're just doing it on your own, it's more difficult.
Yeah. And with the Bats, did you wanted to continue in the same vein as Sea Savage, or did you wanted to try something different that Gamma Bomb hasn't done before?
Yeah, there's definitely a conscious idea that we wanted to try and like make sure that the album had like kind of for us anyway mid-tempo songs like and then super fast songs. So we would have something like Egyptron, which was very Iron Maiden-y, and then something like Living Dead at Beverly Hills, which was a lot more like Slayer or Anthrax kind of thing. So yeah, we became aware a lot more that the albums should have like peaks and curves and stuff like that. Which is kind of strange for us because, you know, we were the sort of band who would write an album that had 16 songs on it and they would all be super fast, you know.
Yeah.
So we were trying to do that a little bit with Bats. And I think we will probably keep doing that on the next record, but maybe try and maybe start writing some shorter songs because it
Yeah.
used to be something we did a lot. And in the last couple of records, we haven't had any short songs at all. So we're gonna try and maybe do like a 16 or 17 song album that has like more of a Tales from the Grave vibe about it, but with some of the good stuff we like from Bats as well, you know.
Yeah. And then I know back in April you released the new EP, Necronomicon Automaton. So how did the idea come to be to sort of make that EP?
It was actually the same thing happened on Sea Savage. What we had done is we recorded like 16 or 17 songs, and then we picked the 12 songs that we liked the best and put them onto Sea Savage. So we did the same on Bats. We recorded 17 songs, and then we had like 5 songs left over, and they were kind of we weren't necessarily unhappy with them. We just had never got round to recording the vocals in the studio for them. The songs were kind of finished, and we liked them. So we just said, you know what, it'd be a cool idea to go and do this. We kind of had an idea that Prosthetic, our label at the time, were going to be folding up shop. So we said, let's just get this out here now so that it doesn't end up sitting on a shelf or something like that, you know.
Yeah, and with this EP, is that like a good idea for what the next Gamma Bomb album will sound like, or is it just like sort of like a one-off kind of thing?
Like there will be elements from the EP certainly. So some of that kind of Judas Priesty stuff, you'll see that. But yeah, we're only really about 6 or 7 songs into the writing at the moment, and we like to try and write about 20 songs and record 15 or 16 we like, and then pare it down to 12 for the record. So we'll see what kind of. It's one of these strange things because, as I said, every single band that you love, you always kind of look back to their early material, and we don't necessarily want to go back and just try and rehash an old Gamma Bomb record, but we want to try and make sure that it's something that we like as well, you know.
All right. And sort of talking about like your bass playing, because I know you've heard your fair share of bass player jokes and seen all the memes and shit. But but I love how you don't gravitate towards like flashy bass playing, but I feel like you find ways to link what the guitars are doing with the melody and what the drums are doing with the rhythm. For you in particular, what's like your approach to like tracking the bass?
Well, I guess back in the day, I remember talking to Mike from Evil about this, being like, "So, what do you play like eighths or sixteenths?" And he was like, I don't know, really." Like, you know, I remember for the first couple of years, it was really just a struggle trying to play as fast as you could. And then, you know, as I got a bit older, I kind of realized there were lots of bits that kind of required the bass to be following the bass drums or doing eighth kind of notes. So A big thing for me was whenever I got my Charvel bass in 2009 or 10, around then. I kind of felt like this was the bass that I'd been wanting to play my entire life. Everything felt super easy to play on it. And yeah, like I think there were like a whole bunch of people who were like really influential, like Jason Newsted from Metallica, or Flotsam and Jetsam as well as bass playing, and that was great. Dan Liker from Nuclear Assault and
Yeah.
Anthrax as well. So really, really, really into that kind of thing, and I could see how they were doing it, and bits that they were choosing to play fast or bits that they were choosing to play slow. So, but like at the end of the day, man, I would consider myself probably songwriter first, and like a singer, stroke backing vocalist second, and then the bass player. Because, as you said, I've never been into the super technical kind of flashy side of playing the bass. And I think that like maybe there's loads of guys like that I love, like Geddy Lee or Steve Harris. They're brilliant bass players. But I kind of felt like for Gambom's music, it was better for the songs to sound fast, you know. So if there was more room for the guitars and drums to kind of sound super tight, that would be better, you know.
Nice. And I'm always curious about like your bass setup. Like what's like to record in live? What's like your go-to in terms of like basses, strings, pedals, amps, all that good stuff?
So I use Charvel 2B basses. Being left-handed is kind of very difficult to get decent gear. So I have like three or four of those, and I have like two that are exactly the same, two red ones that I bring out for touring, and then I have another red one that only gets used in the studio, and I've got a white one as well. But they're all pretty much the same. They have Spectre pickups in them, badass bridges. As far as like effects and stuff, I use the Sans amp, like the programmable one. 45 gauge strings, 1 mil picks, and I like using SVT bass heads. Like a lot of the time, we can kind of, if we're playing a festival, you can ask for a certain head and cab to be there, you know. So I like that kind of combination because it gives you that cool kind of Dee Dee Verney little, like a bright kind of punchy sound, you know. So
Yeah.
I love that kind of sound.
Nice. And so kind of also in the end to sort of wrap things up, what's next for Gamma Bomb? I know you mentioned you're slowly starting working on the next album. Is there just anything else you'd like to plug in terms of like shows and stuff?
We've got a UK tour coming up now in October, so we'll be going over there for 6 or 7 shows. Then we've got a German tour in December. 70,000 tons coming up in January,
I'll
and
see
another
you there.
European tour. Yep. We've got a European tour with Lich King in March. And what else? We're going back to Japan and back to South America. So we've got like a whole bunch of shows pretty much planned from now until the end of 2026. And by that stage, I think we'll be ready to, you know, bring out the next record, you know.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the boat. I'm buying you a beer if I see you.
I'm gonna take you up on that offer, dude, because the beers are like $15 or something.
Yeah. They'll save you 15 bucks and not to stereotype, but if they have Guinness, I'll get you some.
We'll give you as many guitar picks as it costs.
Hell yeah. But thank you, Joe, for coming on. It's so great to be able to chat with you. Any final words you want to say to like the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Just say, guys, thank you very much for listening to Gambom all these years. We really appreciate our fan base over in the States. And yeah, we will be back. And yeah,
In
keep
the
thrashing.
2350.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everybody, Joe from Gamma Bomb, and we'll see you next time.